The next step in the city power grab was to push the UDC. And of course, the same planning commission had been in place for basically adopting and agreeing that the general rights in the plan of Cheyenne was still in place. So they, when they presented the idea of reviewing for the uniform development code, they had already been exposed to a lot of those thoughts and processes. And after reviewing the plan, they were 100% to kill the plan was passed.
Bill Shorts, of course, played a lot of this, and he was on that commission at that time. And he said they reviewed every paragraph in that UDC and decided not to fit the city of Cheyenne.
Obviously, it's more like getting into this mushroom cellar we live in. And obviously, we talk about having these open houses and planning commission meetings and various things.
But by this point, there's enough people seeing the light that they could not, the planning staff could not generate a public hearing that came out with anything positive for the UDC. And of course, I don't know how many of you actually know the story from there, but the staff was appointed by the mayor, along with 5 other people out of the development committee, to develop, they call it critical path, but basically it's an emergency recovery effort to get past the public input portion of it. You know, anybody's been here any period of time, whether you're on the commission, welcome to new members for being on this. I recognize it takes a lot of time and effort, and your role, of course, is to dissent and advise. But I write a letter to the editor every year prior to this meeting and ask them to publish it on Sunday, because generally Sunday is the day before the meeting and generally the best circulation. Well, last year, they did not publish my letter on a Sunday. And instead, they ran a full page, opinion page, finding fault with the planning process. This year, as you already know, they took the full page talking about the sign ordinance, and that's interesting because last year, where your members point out, say, this does not look like it's constitutional, you need to work out with the city attorney to try to find some combination that meets the constitutional requirements. Well, they all agreed it was unconstitutional. But I don't know if anything came out of the planning staff that met the standard, and so finally a couple of the city council members took it upon themselves to develop I guess they call it an amendment that they thought, and apparently other people thought would meet the constitutional requirement, but because it's an amendment, it required a supermajority, and it failed. And of course, the way it was immediately corrected, of course, the lawsuit was filed, and they did away with all sign ordinance requirements for political signs. Now, it's really interesting reading the paper on Sunday, and that was that this lawsuit had already been lost in '95 or some time ago, and so they knew it was unconstitutional, been proved unconstitutional in court, but yet somehow the planning staff managed to insert it back in to the UDC in 2012. Now, I don't know what you guys are doing for consent and advice, but that got past you at that point, although it was recognized later by one of your members. And I know she's not here anymore. I assume she's tired of being a mushroom. My observation is the planning staff needs to a foreign drummer. I don't know if that drummer's called Colorado or whether it's called the UN. But I do not think the University at Boulder would grant at least advanced degree to anybody studying community planning that ever stated, yeah, I'm going to enforce the Constitution, public rights, and landowners' rights and freedom. So what do mushrooms do when they realize there's something going on out there? First of all, you get educated. And last year I asked a member of the Planning Commission if he knew what ICLEI was, and the response was no. What is that? Well, I didn't follow up to inform him or get him more about it. But TICLI is a UN-sponsored organization that provides most of the plans and ideas for and the software for running basically various city programs. And what I recommend for anybody who really wants to know what's going on, and I would think would be required reading for anybody accepting responsibility beyond your planning commission or county planning commission, would be to pick up this book, and it's written by Rosa Corey in California. And and there's a lot of books out there. Even Lynn Beck has a novel probably based on Agenda 21. But the reason I picked this one is she's so opposite of what we are in this room. We're generally conservative, whether we're Democrat or Republican. In this state, we're conservative. This gal is an activist, Democrat, lesbian, but also a professional real estate appraiser. When she saw what this plan, Agenda 21, and urban renewal and the various things that are part of it, was doing to her city and the city of Cheyenne, or excuse me, the city in California, she developed hardened her attitude, I guess. I don't know if she developed it or not at that point. And that was, how do we address some of these concerns that are being slipped in on us as mushrooms? And this is a way to eliminate what's going on around you. And if in the end, if you read it, and then you agree with some of the things that are going on, at least you know the background and make an informed decision of why some of those things are happening and whether they should be beneficial to the city of Cheyenne. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your guys' effort, whatever abuse you might take, and I might share putting some of that out. I do appreciate you and the council members just trying to make it right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Further public comment?
Good evening, planners. Emily Hazener, Laramie County Commissioner. You live in the county. You live in Cheyenne. You live in the county. Remind the mayor that once in a while. I thank you guys for not having a midnight ordeal as we did last year. When we brought the sign ordinance up that was unconstitutional, it was 12:15 at night. And you used to rank these topics 1 through 3, and I don't know how you must be doing a little bit different. I'd like to reference topic 1, and that is to just solve all of 1 through 9, and let's just vote the UDC codes away and revert back to the older codes. I would even be generous tonight and let you pick the top 10 things you think's in the UDC codes, if you would like to amend that, if you're going to vote on this later. This is about the home builders, the mom and pop businesses, the big industrials businesses, the architectural design, and property rights. I'm going to throw a little curve in here, and I'd like another amendment to topic 1. And that I've heard a lot of comment the last 6 months to a year that at least every 3 years we should have a ballot vote on whether we even want UDC codes. So I would like it if you'd recommend to the council that we would every 3 years have a chance for the public to have a vote on this. I told them the other night at the county planning, I said the Constitution is very clear, and it gives the authority to the people. And with that authority, they created a free nation. And I don't see why we wouldn't honor them and give the power back to the people who have the authority to decide their own destiny. We want to preserve our Western heritage, and a lot of these architectural design buildings that are old Western heritage downtown would not even pass UDC codes. And we come here year after year, and we'd like to get rid of these UDC codes. We ask them to rename them our community codes if we was to start over. These are all common sense ideals. As you're well aware that not too many of the UDC codes was voted in favor of the public last year. The beautification, reducing them was voted down. and the only one that did make it was the sign ordinance that I know of, and it was done because of the Constitution. This wonderful 77-page Constitution has put more egg on the faces of politicians that don't listen to the people than any other document that I know. And I'd like to speak to topic 9, and that is to allowing more time for notification on standards. You know, unless the people know what's coming down their way in a 90-day period or so, and more notification and public input, you really don't know the will of the people. And our local government is so important that we listen to the true bosses of Laramie County and the true bosses of these small mom and pop businesses that think they're getting run over by these UDC codes.
Commissioner Hasenauer, that would be topic 8.
Yes, sir. I apologize. Topic 8. Thanks for the correction. Yeah, topic 1 and topic 8. But yes, we do. We appreciate you guys volunteering your time and your service to our community. But to make these recommendations on topic 1, it's time. And my most important thing is to throw you that curveball. And let's get a ballot vote on UDC codes. And I'm sure local government's going to be seeing a lot of in the next 2 weeks about Plan Cheyenne too. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would point out, as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, last year was our first rodeo, if you will, for the annual review. Obviously, we could have handled that better. I think that this year has been put together really quite well. And I'd like to thank the mayor and the planning staff for their efforts on this, but we'll actually end up having 4 meetings all told. The Planning Commission will, and I think that will give us really a much better opportunity to weigh in on these important topics and, again, hopefully make some good recommendations to the governing body. With that, the public comment period is still open. If you'd like to weigh in, public comment is still open.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to readdress a little bit. I told you I sat through Plan Cheyenne, and in the end I objected to it. I'd like to correct that a little bit. I like the idea of Plan Cheyenne, as long as just a map on the wall saying this is the general guide for the way we think, and we obviously don't know what the future will hold. I agree with the idea of having a map on the wall saying this is the direction we think we may go, but we may not. Because a landowner may come in and say, that's not what I have planned. But I think you need to remove UDC from the enforcement document that forces that on everybody who never agreed to it. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Public comment. Public comment.
Boyd Wiggum with Wyoming Liberty Group. I also live at 3359 Alexander Avenue, just north of Pershing. Members of the Planning Commission, I want to thank you. I also want to thank you for your service and for your volunteerism and support of the community. And I want to thank you and the governing body and the planning staff for your foresight as you were preparing the UDC to include this annual review as an opportunity to really focus attention on not the day-to-day minutia of how each project is going forward, but take a step back and look at what works and what doesn't. Tonight, I think there's really important, especially considering that all of the design guidelines, in addition to the building requirements and zoning, are subject to a criminal penalty for violation. In other words, if I build something that doesn't meet the architectural design guidelines, I've committed a crime in Cheyenne. I submitted 2 topics for your consideration tonight. I just tried to pick out 2 issues that I think really bothered me about the code as it stands now, especially as I've watched projects work through the process during the latter half of this year. First, I want to draw your attention to the housing, the residential zoning districts that we have in the code. Under Article 5, particularly Section 5.1.2, you'll see that there are 9 residential type districts, neighborhood districts. In addition, you have two specific types of residential zoning districts under the agricultural section, and we also have a mixed-use residential emphasis district, plus some of the other mixed-use districts do allow residential uses. We've got, so by my count, that's 11 primarily residential zoning districts. Yet in the code right now, we only have 10 defined residential building types. Yes, there's an urban residential loft type residential building that is working its way through the governing body now. But in essence, we have significantly more gradations of residential zoning than we have housing types. This is problematic, and we saw this this past fall with a couple of attempts to rezone for mixed use, more dense housing, infill housing, which is something that both Plan Cheyenne and UDC aspire to. When, in one case, 7 neighbors signed a petition. This is a political risk, and I think by reducing the number of minute little zoning types that bring every project, regardless of how dense the residential use is or how intensive the use is, before the Planning Commission and the governing body, that exposes developers to a political risk that really should not be something that they face here in Wyoming, in the U.S. When I think political risk, I think of investing in natural resources someplace where there's a dictatorship. But I'm worried about property rights. Therefore, I think I identified the medium density, high density, and neighborhood residential districts as potentially being able to be consolidated into something that would capture more of the mid-range residential density. They could capture the duplexes and the townhouses and maybe even the fourplex apartments. I don't know whether or not the planning department would want to supply some information about how much difference there really is how much difference and impact there is on the infrastructure of the city from one of these housing types to the other. Realizing that huge apartment complex or single-family detached housing are going to be different than something that's more of a medium density residential use. So I'd ask that you prioritize taking a look at trimming those down and then allowing the developers and the landowners to develop their plans to the extent that they really don't impact city infrastructure and really aren't significantly more intensive than the mixed, walkable, slightly more intensive residential uses that the plan aspires to. The second issue I want to bring before you and ask you to work on over the course of the year, I have since learned was something that came up last year, and that is some of the building design standards that are in Article 6. I pulled out sections 6.6.1, 6.6.3, 6.7.5, and 2 tables that list residential building materials that specify what building materials people are permitted to build their buildings out of. As I understand, there was actually a more extensive markup of Article 6 that was presented to you last year and was prioritized maybe as a Tier 2 item. I see this as problematic in 3 ways. First, these standards increase the cost of building. When you started requiring more expensive materials just to be allowed to put up a building, regardless of who the intended market is, those are costs that have to get passed along to individual households or individual businesses. Secondly, this degree of specificity requiring building materials and specifying model variations within any given project counteracts some of the principles in Plan Cheyenne, specifically the idea that we want to have a mixture of a variety of types and uses and designs within the city, and trying to serve multiple market points with higher and I wish I was a builder so I could talk to the incremental cost of adding model choices to a neighborhood. But I do know that the Levittown example, which was the first mass workforce housing project allowing people to move out of apartments and into the suburbs following World War II, and accommodated many children being able to play in the backyard, the classic American dream, was modeled on a simple design that can be tweaked and modified a little bit. That served a different market than the upscale suburbs, the estates. This community is big enough that we have a wide range of incomes within the community. Unfortunately, and you'll see this in Plan Cheyenne, and you'll see data elsewhere, our housing costs have increased at about twice the rate as the average household income, median household income, over the past 10 years. I'm drawing this from Plan Cheyenne. This is Census Bureau data. In Cheyenne, the median household income has increased by about 30% from 2000 to 2010, whereas the median new home construction price, new construction home price increased by about 60%. Now we're looking at a income to housing price ratio of about 1 to 3, and a little bit of data, a little bit of reference I could find said about 1 to 2.5, 1 to 2.5 is the ratio that you're looking for affordable housing. That, coupled with the well-known problem we have with lack of apartment housing, rental housing, extremely low vacancy rate, this body and the newspaper and the city council is grappled with, suggests to me that, at least in the near term, we need to be trying to change our requirements to allow more housing, more affordable housing to come onto the market to respond to that. And my final problem with this, and this is probably the most significant, is that when the government uses criminal law to dictate architectural taste to individuals, we're toying with the issue of architecture as the fusion of science, a very technical field, with a very artistic field. And we aspire to variety. One of the things when I think of a lot of the Western ethos is possibility rather than conformity. We have more freedom. You know, that's why some people came here, and it's that possibility, that doing something new and different, and the level of mandate embodied in Article 6 causes a problem there. I don't know whether or not the constitutional protection for art extends to artwork. It covers some things that I think are grotesque or problematic. But I think of some of the iconic buildings. We want to preserve our history, but what about our future history? What about what we're doing today that will become something historic in the future. Does this allow a new icon? Is the Sydney Opera House emblematic of the typical Sydney architecture that predated it? How non-conformist was the Eiffel Tower to Paris and what had previously existed in Paris? Yet these are things that became a symbol of a city, even though they did not fit the norm. So I would ask that you do two things. One, I'd ask that you look at trying to reduce political risk and reduce the expense exposure to developers and consolidate the residential zoning categories, districts down to something that gives you your low, your medium, your high, and then I think you need to preserve the mixed-use residential. I really like the idea of mixed uses throughout the community. I embrace that. And secondly, I'd ask that you take another look at portions of Article 6 that really invade creative freedom for individuals, for the architects and building owners who are putting money into private businesses. I like the style they reflect. Maybe the thing to do is to apply them to all civic buildings rather than to private buildings. Or else maybe these standards should be incorporated into the form-based codes in Article 7. But that would still allow individual landowners to have some freedom. I think those are both topics worthy of further review. One I think is a little more technical. The second one I think is wider in scope, but it follows on a request testimony we heard last year. And I think that there could be some problems there. So thank you, and I'll stick around and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. Public comment is still open. Public comment.
Bonnie Ryder at 515 West Allison Road in Cheyenne, in the county. I'm speaking on topic number 1. And thank you all for, Mr. Chairman, thank you for, and all of you for hearing the concerns of the people and for having at least 3 and now I hear 4 meetings. This is very helpful to us. I'm a citizen who lives on the south side. I also own a ranch. I was born and raised here. I still own the ranch that my father homesteaded in Cheyenne. I'm very concerned about hearing about UDC. I haven't read the Unified Development Codes. I probably wouldn't understand them if I did. And I wonder, if all of you have read all of them and really understand according to the meetings that we've had. I'm not against planning at all. All of us know that we have to plan every day just to get through the day. We all had to plan just to get here tonight. So I'm not against planning, I'm not against progress. But I am really concerned about something entitled Unified. Because Unified to me, and I've read Agenda 21, and that does sound like something that you want to draw us in and unify us with other countries and other states. Similar developments, and I'm just going to use one. Detroit, for example. I understand that was one of the first cities that was under the, I guess the guise of like Plan Cheyenne, Plan Fort Collins, and I guess it was Plan Detroit. And we all know that hasn't gone well. So I don't want Cheyenne to become like that. I am a Westerner. I believe that you should all go back to the old codes, but I also believe that because of your experience with the UDC, you could use what you've learned in the UDC to modify, amend, reinstate the old codes, and we could progress, we could grow. It would be magnificent. We could continue with our Western heritage. People come here. I have people who come from California and Pennsylvania to see the Cheyenne Frontier Days. And they like seeing the pickup trucks and the trailers and the horses and the cattle and the hay and the manure and the dirt on the boots and hats. That's the West. That's the Old West. This is not going to retain our Old West heritage. I can guarantee you we're going to end up looking like Detroit. We're not Detroit. People come here for tourism to see the Old West. They want to get away from all that condensed housing and all those rules and regulations and electric cars and bicycles. They come here to see the Old West, and that's what I personally am all about, and I believe I'm speaking for a lot of people in Cheyenne. I echo the comments made by Mr. Simpson. I echo the comments made by Mr. Wiggum and Commissioner Hasenauer. Please get rid of UDC codes. It's not doing any of us any good. It's causing me to have heartburn, and probably a lot of the rest of us. We don't want it. Please listen to what we're asking and try to work with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Bonnie. Public comment. Public comment is still open.
Hi, I'm Betty Scranton, 7315 Julia Road, in the county. And my husband and I moved here not too long ago, so this is fairly new to us. As a matter of fact, my husband just downloaded the full code. I helped him carry it in.
Well, welcome to Cheyenne.
Thank you. So I wanted to share with you something that we came across this evening as we were going through the book on your T-zones, your transect zones. And one of them in particular is 7.1.2a, and that says, T-zones utilize land use, density, and intensity to create a quality environment by specifying how they are assets to the community. And then this part, rather than regulating them as potential detriments to the development. And note, what I noticed is the human reference for the use of community while de-emphasizing the human aspect of the development. Development can't happen without a developer who has been defined in this code as a private property owner, suddenly bereft of representation as his land now becomes assets reassigned to the collective, also known as the community. Now take a look at a strange word not used in the American free market system, even as that same concept thrives in a more globalist community. It's called now I can't even say it, communitarianism. Have you heard of that? Please take a look at the meaning and then notice how it lines up perfectly with T-Zone 7.1.2a in Cheyenne's Uniform Development Code. Communitarianism is a social and political philosophy that emphasizes the importance of community as opposed to social and political philosophies that enhance personal autonomy and individual rights, especially the rights to liberty and property. Let's rethink these codes that appear to be code words for a foundational change for Americans that promises to diminish, not create, the quality environment that only private property rights are able to provide. And the question before you tonight, dear planners, are you going to vote for something that's on the face of it confiscatory? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Public comment is still open. Public comment.
Mine's a whole different
Good evening, Chairman. Should I proceed?
You may, Mr. Laborn.
Thank you. Yeah, just came in a little late, I'm sorry. So are you taking public comment in regard to,
We are indeed.
is there any format here you're following?
No, we would like you to be somewhat brief if possible. If you can relate your comments to the specific items before us, the submittals for this year's annual review. That would be helpful, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I didn't have a chance to review that, but I didn't want to go back a year to your previous meeting in regard to the UDC, and of course I followed the process through the years and attended the meetings of the review committee and your meetings. But it's kind of an unusual item here, but you might recall, and I don't see him here tonight, that Mr. Boheim had some comments and issues a year ago at this very meeting in regard to asphalt preparation, which was a issue that was noted in the minutes. And I just wanted to reiterate that that was perhaps an unusual approach that he took in discussing the composition of the city's asphalt program. But nevertheless, it was one that came forward in this annual review, and I think it's one that should be seriously considered due to the problems we're having with our asphalt here in the community and its longevity, which of course is the foundation of our road program. So I'll be following up on this as time proceeds here, and I appreciate the opportunity, but I do want to note that that was a concern that Mr. Boheim raised, and his concern was one that I think should be taken very seriously by the city of Cheyenne. It was the voice of experience, and he did note that problem. I would urge some of the people here tonight and some of the members of the commission to look at the roadway right out in front of the building here at the intersection of 22nd and O'Neill, which was reconstructed 5 or 6 years ago when I was on the city council, and is now alligated in a very serious condition and has been patched. So I do understand that the UDC in general doesn't get into asphalt composition, but I do recall that Mr. Boheim did, and I think it's something that definitely needs some follow-up. Thank you.
Mr. Laybourne, thank you. And just for your information, last year we attempted to do everything in one meeting, which was, hindsight being 2020, not the most constructive use of really anyone's time. I think that this year we've got a much better approach for how we handle the annual UDC review. It began on January 21st when we met with planning staff at the conclusion of one of our commission meetings and with the mayor, and we put together an approach, which is really a kind of a three-phased approach for how we're going to consider items that come before this body as part of the annual UDC review, how we prioritize those, and hopefully make some good recommendations to the governing body. One of the things that came up by Mr. Escobedo, in essence, is what you just brought to us just now. There were items that were brought before this body in last year's annual review. On March 3rd, we will have more of a work session for the Planning Commission, and our hope in that meeting is that we can prioritize not just the items that have been brought before us for this annual review in 2014, but also look at the items that did not hit the mark, if you will, last year, and potentially reconsider those for inclusion or dismiss them altogether. But we'd like to make sure that we cover all of that so that nothing gets lost in the cracks, and that everything that was brought before us is appropriately discussed, and we have at least an answer to those folks that put the time and effort into bringing those items before us as to why they're not included or included and what the priority is. So I think we'll have a lot more time in this review session to really do that with some good deliberation. And again, our hope is to provide the community and the governing body with some good recommendations going forward.
Mr. Chairman? Well, as I do recall that was perhaps I could categorize it as a second-tier consideration that deserved attention, but I don't believe there was any follow-up from that year to this year, correct? In regard to this asphalt issue?
I believe that is correct, Mr. Leawood.
So I applaud you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Far too many things fall through the cracks. And really, if an issue is raised, it needs to be pursued. And certainly when you're talking about planning of our community, as you know better than anyone, there's an incredible variety of issues, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this one.
Thank you. Public comment is still open. Public comment. Ms. Vedder, where were we?
Jean Vedder, 4711 Moran Avenue. I have like a 10-minute presentation I wanted to show you guys. Is that too much?
Please go right ahead.
Okay. Can I show you a PowerPoint too?
You'll have to get staff to help you out on that.
So, thanks tonight. I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the people who talked already tonight. Bonnie, I thought I can really appreciate what Bonnie was saying, and I would actually really agree that the architectural requirements in the UDC ought to really be looked at. I know that there's the administrative adjustment that's going through council right now, and I do hope that that 50% increase in administrative adjustments can be used very generously and consistently for some of these issues. So hopefully that's a positive option for us. I would also agree with Boyd Wiggums in terms of some of the architectural issues that seem to come up a lot. My particular submittals for the annual review are specifically in regards to some of the landscape code. So thank you for allowing me to present my proposals tonight, and I'll attempt to be brief. I noted in the statements regarding my proposals in the summary of 2014 annual review topics, I just wanted to make some clarifications. I would like to increase the points given for larger species of trees. The change is intended to improve the overall quality of landscaping with a limited reduction of quantity of trees. It would encourage the use of larger trees which provide substantially more shade, habitat, and air quality. Number 2, I would like to increase the points given for shrubs, which is intended to encourage the use of more shrubs and reduce the use of grass in general. Number 3, decreasing the points given for turf grasses in 3 categories is intended to discourage the use of too much turf, thereby reducing the quantity of water needed. And I would like to allow for unirrigated, native, and or drought-tolerant grasses in the LI, light industrial, and HI, heavy industrial zone districts. You can have the next slide, please, Brandon. I'm a strong advocate for quality landscaping to mitigate the impacts of development, a tree hugger, if you will. As stated in previous discussions regarding current landscape requirements, I reassert landscaping is one of the least expensive treatments used to mitigate these impacts. Slide 3, please. So landscapes alter the environment, they moderate the climate, they improve air and water quality, and harbor wildlife. Next slide. Landscapes moderate temperatures. Trees, especially big trees, provide shade, which cools pavements and buildings. Next slide, please. Landscapes improve water quality and help to prevent runoff, as long as we're not over-applying fertilizers and herbicides. They intercept and store water. Next slide. Landscapes improve air quality. They remove dust and other particulates. They absorb carbon monoxide and produce oxygen. A single mature tree can absorb carbon dioxide at a rate of 48 pounds per year and release enough oxygen back into the atmosphere to support 2 human beings. Next slide, please. These are the design objectives for the landscape standards in the UDC. My amendments, essentially ecological and environmental functions, will be further enhanced. For B, improving the aesthetic character, improvement to aesthetic character will not be altered. For C, this objective would not be altered. For D, this objective would not be altered. For E, this objective will be enhanced. For F, this objective will be enhanced. For G, this objective will not be altered. For H, this objective would be significantly enhanced. Next slide, please. Plan Cheyenne describes that landscape design should focus on integration of native plantings and landscaping where appropriate. It further describes that in our dry climate, we should plan our landscapes carefully into high and low water use areas as appropriate based on visibility and for levels of activity and usage. Next slide. During my time as a planner in the City Development Office, I was given the responsibility of reviewing landscape plans that were submitted with site plan applications. As a regulator, I was required to make sure a proposed landscape complied with code. Since I've been working as a consultant, I've had the opportunity to apply the code in a different way. Now I'm seeing how it works in the real world. What I've noticed in the general sense is that turf grasses are encouraged by providing large point quantities for them. The use of shrubs is discouraged by providing too few points for them. And large tree species are discouraged because in many instances, especially where property coverage allowances have decreased, such as the lot type MD4 and lot types MD1 and MD2, a landscape designer has a difficult time fitting it all in without resorting to the use of ornamental trees. Next slide, please. What I'm advocating for is the responsible use of resources, especially water, and feel a personal responsibility to make sure that those of us working in the landscape industry are part of the solution rather than part of the problem. I am not advocating for no irrigation. Low volume, drip type irrigation is absolutely necessary when transplanting trees and shrubs, and spray irrigation is an absolute requirement when growing turf grasses such as bluegrass and fescue. Next slide, please. But landscaping should be at least as much about protecting and conserving our natural resources as it is about improving the aesthetics in Cheyenne. I think the city should think long and hard regarding imposing policies or regulations that don't support water conservation and or encourage the thoughtless use of fertilizers and pesticides wherever possible. Next slide, please. What I am proposing for irrigation in the LI and HI districts where seeded, native, and drought-tolerant grasses are proposed is that since native and drought-tolerant grasses do not require supplemental irrigation for establishment or to sustain themselves, why would we impose irrigation requirements on them? These amendments will not change the requirement that trees and shrubs on industrial sites will be required to be drip irrigated and that seeded native drought-tolerant grasses will need to be reseeded given poor germination and or poor performance. Next slide, please. So how much water are we really talking about? Well, according to Plan Cheyenne, the city's current capacity of potable water treatment system is 40 million gallons per day. The sprinkler heads that you see to your left apply water in gallons per minute. Depending on the head and the distance they throw, they will throw out anywhere from a half gallon up to 20 gallons per minute. Drip irrigation emitters that you see on the right side of your screen slowly drip water in gallons per hour, and the typical tree receives 5 to 10 gallons per watering session, maybe once a week, every 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So this is a conservative analysis of irrigating all of the right-of-way located adjacent to the LI and HI districts within the city. This is only applying a ½ inch of water per irrigation session. Most bluegrass and fescue grasses require more, and assumes landscape areas that are only about 20 foot wide. Many landscaped areas located in the right-of-way along industrial sites are wider. This represents 2.2 million gallons of water per irrigation session. Next slide, please. Irrigating the internal grass areas of private and government properties within the LI and HI districts. And if you note there, I kind of broke that down, figured out how many acres we had and applied kind of an average property coverage, landscape coverage, and it assumes that we're putting all of that in grass. Equates to 4.2 million gallons per watering session. So remember, that's once or twice a week that we're doing this. Reducing the irrigation requirement under the stated circumstances in the LI and HI districts could save more than 6.4 million gallons of water per irrigation session. This is around 16% or 1/6 of the current capacity of the city treatment facility. Next slide, please. I took 2 variances for irrigation on native turf grasses before the Board of Adjustment in 2013. One was approved for the proposed Teton Business Park located in the LI district at the northeast corner of Old Happy Jack Road and Westland Road. Next slide, please. The other variance was approved for the Volvo site that is currently under construction at 8422 Hutchins Drive, located in the LI district in Campstool. We proposed that all trees and shrubs would be provided with low-volume drip irrigation and that native grass seeding would be done based on best management practices and the guidelines provided in Appendix G of the UDC. Neither request was in any way supported by staff, which is okay. It prepared me to better answer the concerns people might have regarding this issue. As I worked through these proposals, I became more and more convinced that the true issue here is that of aesthetics. One board member remarked that in approving the variance, we should all be mindful that sustainability is beautiful. I would heartily agree with that sentiment. I received letters of support from the Laramie County Conservation District for both requests. The Board of Adjustment clearly understood the issue and both variances were approved. Next slide, please. The next slide is a little bit hard to see, but this is an example of what's expected in a industrial area. This was for the Laramie County School District No. 1 transportation facility this summer. And if you can see, there's a whole bunch of irrigation heads that had to be installed in the right-of-way. It's essentially kind of a rural road section too, so it's kind of an odd thing to have to irrigate. Let's talk about aesthetics for a moment. As you look at the examples I'm about to show you, please be careful to weigh the benefits of native xeric plantings against the cost of irrigated turf grasses. I realize that all of us, including myself, have become so accustomed to the lush look of turf grass, it's hard for us to be objective. Its deep green color and nearly perfect surface tend to provide us some sort of visual sense of comfort. This look has been so deeply imprinted on our brains that it can sometimes be difficult to consider the ultimate cost to the environment and natural resources. Next slide, please. So these are some pictures that I took this summer up on Story Boulevard. I think this was all done when Story Boulevard was built about 9 years ago. Excuse me. All the trees are on drip irrigation, and all of the grasses have required no supplemental irrigation. And it essentially has just gotten better and better with time. The next slide, please. This is Oregon Trail Bank, Ridge and Lincoln Way. Same thing, this is a xeric landscape, native grasses. Of course, they're not nearly as green as what we're accustomed to, but the more I sort of start adding up all the water and all that, the more attractive they look to me. Next slide, please. This is Our Savior Lutheran Church off of Del Range, and their xeric planties as well as their native grasses. Next slide, please. This is a bit of tree lawn or sidewalk that runs along Del Range between Glendo and Pierce. And then the next slide, please. This is the Laramie Recreation Center, and this is all done in native grasses. So it doesn't look like bluegrass and fescue. I agree with that, but at what cost are we putting in all the nicer stuff? Many of the areas in our local parks are not irrigated and have well-established native grass. I'm almost done here, guys. State and federal highway projects accomplish revegetation with drought-tolerant and native grasses without the use of supplemental irrigation all the time and with very good results. Next slide, please. So why not just provide an irrigation system just in case? Properly seeded native and drought-tolerant grasses do not require supplemental irrigation, and I'm opposed to providing an irrigation system just in case for several reasons. I've seen numerous examples in which the existence of an irrigation system creates the temptation for maintenance people to overwater, fertilize, and regularly use pesticides to create a turf grass look, and therefore make the whole purpose of native, less water and resource-consumptive plantings a moot point. A quick look at websites for local lawn care companies is revealing. They provide recommendations that turf areas be watered every 3 to 5 days, recommendations for 5 applications of fertilizer with all but 1 application including weed and insect control. Another reason is sprinkler-type irrigation systems are very expensive. They cost in the realm of $1.25 to $1.50 per square foot. Native and drought-tolerant grasses do not require irrigation, and while it might feel like a simple solution to provide an irrigation system to aid in establishment of these grasses, for a large site such as the Volvo site I showed you, it would cost as much as $100,000 to $120,000 to construct an irrigation system for this purpose. That's a large financial investment for a system that is not necessary. Why would one provide an irrigation system when you don't need it? The other problem I have with it is that irrigation systems can be a wonderful tool, but they need to be managed properly and often are not. Have you ever noticed how turf grasses like bluegrass and fescue during the hot months of the summer, like July and August, start to look stressed and brown, and how often we are tempted to pour the water to them? The reason they look like that is because they're cool season grasses, and in the heat of the summer they want to go dormant. They're hot and they're not necessarily dry, but we throw a bunch of water at them, which cools them at the same time, overwaters them, but it keeps them really green. Look at what's happened to St. Mary's School or the county library. The library has a detention basin planted with native grasses, and most grass areas at St. Mary's are native grasses. Because they were required to provide an automatic irrigation system, they've since been managed like turf grasses, getting mowed, watered, and presumably fertilized in the same way as a typical bluegrass or fescue lawn. Basically, my amendments include the recognition that we have Appendix G in the UDC, which has specific seeding standards, so mulching and that kind of stuff would be required. Mowing would be required. The city code already requires that people keep things mowed to 6 inches or less. That's only going to help native grasses to establish. So I'm really confident. And of course, there's always going to be a really bad drought year where things just don't come on. But we could reseed any given site 10 times for the or 50 times for the cost that it would cost us to install an irrigation system. So my amendments are definitely, I'm keeping in mind that we have performance standards in the UDC. People have to go back and receive things if they don't do well. And we have standards to make sure that all of these things work out the way they should. Next slide, please. It all comes down to people's perceptions of what a landscape should look like. If we are to be truly environmentally sustainable, we must give up the idea that landscapes should be instant and perfectly green, lush, cut to a height of 2 to 3 inches, and without any bare spots, anthills, or a few weeds. Until we can see things differently, we will never accomplish the goals of protecting the environment and conserving natural resources. If you looked at the examples I provided, you would see that the native grasses blend nicely with the native prairie that surrounds Cheyenne. It's also important to realize that unlike constructing a building that includes attractive stone veneer or other ornamentation, which is specifically meant to improve aesthetics in the city, landscapes can and should provide as much, if not more, function as the aesthetics they provide. Landscapes are workhorses. They prevent soil erosion into waterways. They clean air, water, and soil, cool buildings, and parking lots. Next slide, please. What I'm describing and proposing these amendments are regionally distinctive and sustainable landscapes that the city should be proud of encouraging. We don't live in the East or the Midwest, where there is enough precipitation to keep most lawns green without supplemental irrigation. We live in Cheyenne, a high-altitude, semi-arid climate. We should embrace the native, beautiful prairie and nature that surrounds us instead of trying to be someplace that we are not. Thanks for the opportunity to present the information tonight. I hope that you will consider it a high priority for amendments to the Unified Development Code, and I'd be happy to hang around and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jeannie. Public comment is still open. Public comment.
Barry Meyer, 8914 Breda Hill Road. Chair, through you, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you letting me speak here. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to say I really love Cheyenne. I mean, I enjoy it. The summer's the best. And so that being said, looking at here on the summary of the 2014 annual review topics, just keeping it simple, 4 and 5, I like to go back to number 1. Let's go back to what worked. That's what I enjoyed. I enjoy Cheyenne. I always thought that it's worked well. And so with that, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Public comment. Public comment.
William Bennett, 3215 and 19 Snyder. I wasn't going to stand up and talk tonight because sometimes I get a little bit tongue-tied and things like that, but here I am. Gateways, corridors, greenways, infill, sustainability, pedestrian ways, bicycle paths, and then there's Cheyenne, Wyoming. Established 1867. I wonder if they had sustainability in mind, and gateways and corridors and infill, and maybe those were tents back then. They walked out here. Maybe that was the pathway, the pedestrian pathway and things like that. They walked out here. And now we're trying to tell everybody through all these plans that we need to tell these people who walked out here how to walk around Cheyenne, Wyoming, and give them a path to do it on. They were the ones that made the path to get here, weren't they? And I'm really not trying to be funny, but I'm trying to be funny. You have a city planner and you have a city developer and you have building standards and codes and things. But now we have 520 pages worth of Plan Cheyenne, and 360 pages worth of Plan Cheyenne redone. And then we have the UDC codes, which are how many pages? 300 pages. And I guess when I came out here at 10 years old the first time and looked down and saw the Capitol, I went, wow, this is really a western town. And then I went to Meeteetse, Wyoming, and went, wow, this is a western town. And my great uncle took me down to the hotel building that had the swinging bar doors, and I saw cowboys sitting in there. And they put me on a bar stool and gave me a little bottle of Coke, and I thought John Wayne was going to come walking in the back door. That's what this place is. Then I came back in an Air Force uniform in the middle 70s. And coming into town, I went, this is wonderful. And you may think it's weird and stuff like that, but the people that aren't from here say it all the time. Wow, I'm glad this place hasn't changed that much. Where you can still come to a rodeo with all the trucks, like our rancher friend, and you don't have to worry about medians at the gateway of every entrance to the city where you can't get your trucks down the main drag into the city. You can't get your trailers down. You can't even get the fire department down those things. And people want to do more. And there's a council like you, and then there's another council over here. And don't get me wrong, plans are wonderful. And Mr. Mayor, in the newspaper the other day, was quoted as saying, we need plans and development systems and things like that for further growth. Of course we do. But until 2006, when Plan Cheyenne was adopted, there was 139 years of development in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that you didn't have Plan Cheyenne, and they've done pretty good. The Capitol building may need a whole lot of money to redo that, with all the things that are in the codes and all the things that are in the UDC and all that other kind of stuff. And you think it's only going to cost what they think it is now? Mr. Mayor, can they even do the Capitol building with what the UDC codes and everything else is telling them they have to do? We're designing our way right out of the West. And the one thing that is so mind-boggling is that when we ask the question, who's read the plan from page 1 to the last one, the UDCs, the Plan Cheyennes and things like that, and people sit back and they don't raise their hand, they just look at us, and I don't know if what's going through your mind is, oh brother, did I get caught? Or, you know, do I have to read this stuff to vote for it? Because we've got a lot of people saying we've got to vote for it and get it into codes and adopt it before we know what it is. And you know how well that went. We've got so many pages and so many books and so many regulations and so many manuals and so many other things all over this country. We couldn't figure out or work our way out of a wet sack anymore. Now, I was an administrator in the Air Force for 18 and a half years. The first year and a half, the Air Force screwed me around because I hadn't read the manuals and the regulations, and they could do whatever they wanted with me. And they did. Until I got to a place called Vietnam, and I had a guy sit me down and say, you've been screwed, glued, and tattooed for the first almost 2 years you've been in the Air Force. What's the matter with you? Don't you know anything? And guess what? I didn't. So he took one of those great big books, just like Plan Cheyenne, and the UDC codes, and it's dropped it down in front of me, and he said, when you get done with it, I'll give you your test. And they didn't screw around with me anymore. And I read it, and I read it again. And then I started writing my own, because the Air Force told me to. And then when I wrote a couple of them, they said, write a few more. You're pretty good. But every time I did that, I took one of the big plans like we're talking about here. It's about this thick and it's got, what, 300-400 pages in it? And guess what you do with it? You tear it up and throw it away. And you start all over again with the essence of what the plan was supposed to be in the first place. And you don't garbage it up with a whole lot of buffalo chips out there in the prairie. And you know what I'm talking about. And then you get the guys coming back in uniform. And I spent 6 years down the road here at Warren. And these guys are coming, leaving and coming all the time. And I used to tell everybody, come on out to Cheyenne, you won't believe it. This is wonderful. And come out during Frontier Days and stuff like that. And guess what? Frontier Days has been going on with people developing it and planning it and everything else, and they never had Plan Cheyenne. And they get, what, 100,000 people out here every year? For how many years? 100 and how many? 18, is it this year? 118? Something like that. And they didn't have Plan Cheyenne, they didn't have UDC codes, and they didn't have anything else. But the guys that come back from overseas after thinking they're protecting something over here, but you wouldn't believe what they're doing to us either. They're making these big plans in these big books and everything else, just like we want to do right here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And some of those plans are scary, folks. They're taking guys in uniform and telling them to come out into American cities and stop us from doing what we want to do. That's in the United States of America. That's against the Constitution. And it's not the oath I took when I was in, and it's not the oath that Rick Kaysen took as an officer or an enlisted man in his branch of service. He took an oath to defend the country against domestic enemies, which is these plans. They come from the EU. They come from the UN. They have all these code names. Well, here in Cheyenne, we call it what it is. A rodeo's a rodeo. A horse is a horse. And buffalo chips are buffalo chips. So please, I came out here at 10 years old, fell in love with the place. Now I live here. My wife has a business here. And everything about what's going on within our city limits in our county is to destroy Cheyenne, Wyoming. How come? Why is that? And if you can't answer me, then get busy, read the thing like I'm doing right now. Read what you're voting on and what you're planning to do. Read it, please, and see how deceptive it is, how much double talk it is, and how much we don't need it. There's a mayor sitting back here, and he's not a dummy. He made it through the military, and he made it to the mayor's office. You folks, you sit here, all of you on this council, you didn't make it here by being dummies either. And we've got to have common sense. And we can't destroy something so nobody else can enjoy it. We can be Denver, we can be Chicago. Cheyenne, Wyoming was supposed to be the Chicago of the West. Thank God it isn't. I'm from there. And no offense to the people of Chicago, Illinois, but it's a dump. And we sure don't want to make our city on the prairie with the Rocky Mountains in the offing, as beautiful as they are, like Chicago, because we won't be able to see it when the horizon goes away. Folks, don't do this to us. Thanks.
Mr. Bennett, thank you.
County Commissioner Emily Haysner. I wanted to go back and address number one. I think it's clear tonight, headline should be that we're designing our way out of our Western heritage, and we want a ballot vote on the UDC codes. But I want it to be made public. What is the formula to get it on the ballot? Is it by petition? Is it a referendum after you pass it? Or can it be done by the city council by resolution? I want to know the formula to get it on the ballot. And now you know why I have the faith that is in these people that spoke tonight against UDC code. That's the best I've ever heard a statement from Ben. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you to this board listening to the comments tonight. Thank you.
Public comment now closed for this meeting. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to come down here and participate and provide us some really good input on our 2014 annual UDC review. We're very appreciative of your time. Hopefully this revised process this year is a little bit better than last year's, and going forward we hope to make this review process as efficient as we can and make sure that we're really tailoring these plans to our community. With that being said, is there any discussion or comments from the commissioners? Hearing none, with the purpose of the public hearing being met tonight, I would like to formally ask staff to provide this body with some background information related to the submitted items, which should include a discussion of the complexity of each issue, applications or cases related to the topic from the previous year, including the items that may have fallen in the cracks. Mr. Escobedo, if you could be helpful in making sure that we have a list of items that you would like this body to look at, we would certainly appreciate your effort in doing that. Also, if staff could provide us with some general workload considerations. Our intent here, folks, is to really make this as genuine as we can. As I stated at the onset, this is an important document for our community, and I think all of us would like to see that it works well for our community and that the end result is something that we're all pleased with. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So moved.
This meeting is over.